Great. Okay, welcome everyone to the eProject Express webinar. We're focusing today on energy savings performance contracting in higher education. I'm Dana Robson, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. Let me see if I can advance the slides. I've lost my controls over advancing the slides. There we go. Our main speaker today is Dean Hansen. He's the Director of Facilities Management at the University of Mississippi. He's going to be talking with Dale Haas, who is an energy savings performance contracting consultant. Daniel Stockmall is joining us from the Department of Energy. And again, I'm Dana Robson from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to talk a little bit about the ESPC campaign.
Great. Thank you, Dana, for kicking us off today. Hello, everybody. I am Daniel Stockmall, and I'm a fellow at the Department of Energy's State and Community Energy Programs Office, and I support our energy savings performance contracting technical assistance programs. Now, many of you might be tuning in today because you're already participating in, or have you heard about the ESPC campaign. But for those that have not, I'd like to just briefly introduce this opportunity to those of you that are interested in learning more about ESPC and celebrating project achievements. So the ESPC campaign is a new national initiative to support organizations, including state and local governments and institutions of higher education, in using ESPC to modernize their facilities, improve efficiency and resilience, reduce utility expenses and emissions, and achieve lead by example and other goals. DOE is working with our ESPC campaign partners to share tools, practical guides, and best practice approaches for ESPC and measurement and verification. In addition to the webinars, such as this one, the ESPC campaign offers our partners trainings, peer exchange convenings, and other on-demand and direct technical assistance tools to support states and other building owners. And so through the ESPC campaign, we also seek to amplify our partners' achievements and showcase examples of successful ESPC projects and programs. And we do this by first highlighting the exemplary work of our partners and engaging partners to share their experiences and insights with others through case studies, partner profiles, and public events. And two, we do this by helping our partners leverage tools like eProject Express, which we'll hear more about later today, to demonstrate project impacts to their leadership teams, communities, and other stakeholder groups. So organizations that are interested in learning more about ESPC, those actively implementing projects, and even those with completed projects who are interested in sharing their knowledge with the others or amplifying their achievements, are all welcome to join the campaign. Energy service companies and other ESPC market stakeholders are also invited to participate as supporters of the campaign. So to join or for more information, please visit the ESPC campaign website or reach out to us at the email address listed below. And now I know I'm excited to hear from Dean Hansen about the University of Mississippi's latest ESPC efforts. So with that, I'll turn it back over to keep things moving along. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dale, and he's going to talk a little bit about EPX.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dana. And Daniel, thanks so much for sponsoring us all to be here today and talk a little bit about energy savings performance contracting. We're all excited to hear from Dean, and so we won't put that too far out of line here, but wanted to take just a moment and draw this slide together, because the truth is, anyone who has any interest in energy savings performance contracting should hopefully by now recognize that all these little circles, these bubbles, all fit into the concept of ESPC. So whether you come to this as a concept of, I got stuff that I need to fix and I don't have enough money and I'm going to use ESPC as a tool to get there, or you have green goals or GHG emission reduction goals that you're trying to reach. I want to leverage public funds. I just want to reduce our costs. Or in fact, you want to enhance or improve the working or learning environment. Really, all of these come under the umbrella of what can be accomplished with energy savings performance contracting. Now, for years, literally 30 years, we tracked performance contracting by the size of the construction amount. And several years back, we started scratching our heads and said, well, wait, we're tracking the wrong things. What we need to do is we need to be tracking the impact that we have, not the construction dollars that we use. So eProject Express was built specifically for state and local marketplaces to track the salient information that you need to store and hold long term and the true results of these projects. So with that little bit of oversight, perhaps as we get started here, Dana, I know we want to collect some information from our attendees. So if you'd launch that first poll, I think that would be at an interesting time here.
Great. Let me go ahead and do that. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I can certainly see it, and
Okay,
I
good.
want to do my best to invite our attendees, take a moment and help us get a sense about why you are here, what you're seeking to learn about. I mean, these simple questions really help guide all of our insights into who you are and how we can best help.
Great. We'll just give it a couple of seconds for everyone to have a chance to respond. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, I think, right now. Looks like we're still getting a couple responses. Great. We can see what our responses are there, I think. We're going to conduct another poll toward the end of the webinar as well. Thank you very much for your participation.
Yeah, so our highest level of focus there is learning a little bit more about energy savings performance contracting, and certainly more from Dean Hansen, who has lived in this world. So welcome, Dean. I just kind of want to move into this. We did very brief introductions of just who people are, but we've heard over and over how valuable these little interviews are to folks in these situations. But the audience always benefits from understanding who you are, the individual, your background and history, your current responsibilities, and with the University of Mississippi. If you'd share with us a little bit about that, please.
Sure, I'd be glad to. My name is Dean Hansen. I am the Director of Facilities Management at the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss. And I wouldn't consider myself an expert in ESPC per se, so I'm not sure how I feel about all of the anticipation about getting to my comments. But we are in the middle of a current project here, which has had quite a bit of benefit for us at the University of Mississippi. A little bit about my background. I've been here on campus in this senior facility officer role for about 6 years now. Prior to this, I was at the University of Texas at Austin in a similar role, and then before that at the University of Memphis. And then for the 20 years prior to coming into higher education in 2013, I was a Civil Engineer Corps officer in the Navy, doing similar things at Navy bases worldwide. So managing shore facilities, infrastructure, construction, environmental programs at Navy bases. So I've got quite a bit of experience in the facilities world, and some experience in each of my roles, whether in the Navy or in higher education, in different phases of an ESPC type program. So I'm happy to share my experiences and what I know, and I hope some of you may find it valuable.
Well, Dean, we certainly want to thank you in a variety of ways for taking time out of your day to day. And on 9/11, we all owe it to thank you for your service in a day of heightened patriotism for sure. Hearing your background and knowing it from our discussions before, you really come into this with this long tenured background in the Navy. And now we're talking on university topics. And while you've had some experiences in universities, maybe you could share for us a little bit about the difference between those two environments, the military environment where you managed facilities and construction projects, and now in the university world.
So it's a great question, and one I got asked a lot as I was transitioning out of the Navy into higher education. And the thing that I like to say then, and which holds true, is, you know, facilities are pretty much the same everywhere. If you think about the comparisons between a Navy base and a higher ed institution, they both have the same types of facilities for the most part. You've got barracks on a Navy base, you've got dormitories on a higher education institution, you've got classroom facilities and research facilities on a Navy base. You have the same types of buildings on a higher education institution. You've got retail space on both types of institutions. I used to say we have airfields and piers in the military that we don't necessarily have in higher education, but a couple of the places I've worked have, and we own an airport here at Ole Miss. So we've got runways and hangars and other things that we're responsible for here. So in a lot of ways, we're very similar from a facilities aspect, and even from the mission support aspect. While we're supporting different missions, you know, the Navy obviously supports the Navy warfighter. The facilities there support the Navy warfighter and their warfighting mission. Higher education, we're supporting a public service, education, and research mission, but we're serving the same demographic, which is primarily, you know, 18 to 25-year-olds who've moved away from home, most of them for the first time, to live on their own. So the transition from the Navy to higher education was a very smooth one. I felt like my experience in the Civil Engineer Corps really prepared me for life as a facilities officer at a university campus.
For the onlooker, it could seem like they were completely different, but I love the parallels you draw. So that puts me in a different mindset, having the opportunity in my life experience to have worked both on military installations and universities. I'm curious how you would portray the difference in the level of authorities or the board involvement, or how you actually move a decision forward in contrast.
Well, that varies. You know, in the Navy, you know, we'd have a saying. Well, we all reported up through a chain of command to Washington, D.C., to a command called Navy Installations Command. So they were responsible for all Navy bases worldwide. And most programmatic decisions were made from the Navy Installations Command in Washington, D.C. And when you're at a base level, we used to always joke about the 3,000-mile screwdriver, because decisions were being made back in DC that affected us on the ground at a naval base in California or in Guam or in, you know, any number of other places. And so that was very interesting and sometimes frustrating to deal with. You get a little more localized control at a university campus. Typically, you've got a lot more authority vested locally in the campus leadership, but most campuses also report to a board at the state level. And so we're still dealing with maybe not a 3,000-mile screwdriver, but a 300-mile screwdriver, where the board in Jackson, Mississippi is now scrutinizing and making decisions about things that we want to do on campus, and, you know, giving us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on what we can and cannot do.
Yeah, Dean. So it's important for people to hear this. What's intriguing to me in my own mind's eye is thinking about how those scenarios work, because really, while we may think, those of us that have been around performance contracting for a long time, that, you know, 30 years, these projects been going on, seems like forever. But on the other hand, it's been 100 years or so as people have been doing conventional bid spec funded capital improvements. So you still find yourself in that spot, I perceive, of trying to go educate folks about this is how this might work for us and why we think it would be a good idea. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Particularly here at Ole Miss, they tried ESPC 20 or so years ago and had a bad experience with it. I wasn't here at the time or part of that, so I don't really know the full history, but that experience 20 years ago left a bad taste in the mouth of the board down in Jackson for a decade or two. And so when we proposed, wanting to reestablish an ESPC program on campus, we had to do a lot of education on how we were going to approach it, the steps we were going to take to try to head off or prevent some of the issues that they had previously, and really just convince them that we were qualified to be able to manage a program such as this on campus.
Yeah, what crosses my mind there, Dean, that I think the audience members would be interested in is, without naming names or getting too specific, we've all heard these little horror stories about something happened. What was it? How do you figure out how to overcome it? What sorts of considerations do you take to try to move forward with that next project?
So again, I don't have a lot of the details other than just vague references to a failed project 20 years ago. I suspect that it had to do with measurement and verification and changing personnel and people not understanding exactly what an ESPC is designed to do and how it's financed. And so over time, just losing sight of the benefit and just seeing it as an ongoing bill to pay, without recognizing the benefits that allowed us to pay that bill.
Again, Dean, you and I have only talked a few times, but I just love how much clarity you can bring to something that's so damaging for folks when they're actually trying to fit in that spot. Recognizing might have been M&V, might have been the lack of M&V. Is that possible? So
Absolutely.
that to say, if nobody's proving, if nobody's validating that the savings were achieved that were designed to pay for the project, well, you've lost the entire tenet of the project from its fundamental, right?
That's right. And then over time, operational changes can occur where, certain control projects, for example, they get reversed or, things get put in hand. It's just not maintained. And so the savings don't stay the same year over year just because of the natural entropy that enters into the operations and maintenance sphere, so to speak. And so it is something that needs to be, I guess, cared for and watched through the term of the contract. And, the relationship with the ESPC partner, as well as the leadership of the facilities organization on the owner's side, understanding how a project like this is supposed to work, I think is really essential to being a successful project.
Yeah, it's funny that no matter how much education you do, capital improvement projects last a year. Well, that's not fair. They get designed, they get constructed, and there's a year of warranty, and then we really don't have to think about them any longer. But if you're really building a project, energy savings performance contracting project, that is intended to, in fact, create the very savings that pay for the work that was produced or pay it back, so to speak, from a financing mechanism, you're in that spot where the relationship needs to continue. And whether your student population goes up or down, or you need to change control strategies, whatever the case may be, mathematically, that needs to be accounted for and is a big part of that concept of measurement and verification. So when you walk into something that was, let's just say, a bit of a failure or fell a little short of grand, it puts you in that position where you need to prepare even better for what the next project would be in the long-term, let's call it consistency of intent. Is that a fair statement to make?
It is, yeah. And we were in I guess a good place here in Mississippi because in 2018, the Mississippi Department of MDA, I'm trying to think of what that stands for now.
Mississippi Development Authority?
Thank you, Mississippi Development Authority, worked with the Senate to revise the statute, the legislation related to energy savings performance contracts and related energy type contracts. And really, I think allowed agencies and institutions, gave us a little more freedom to begin to pursue a project like this. And so I relied heavily on advice from the MDA, along with, frankly, the Department of Energy model contract documents that were available on the website to really ensure I understood exactly how this was supposed to work and how I could best protect the interests of the university throughout the RFP process, selection process, and then as we got into the investment grade audits and the project, the project preparations and proposals and contracting, how we could ensure that we were protecting our equities and our interests throughout.
Yeah, so to reinforce that for our listeners, the model set of documents that are posted on the DOE website, and actually there's a couple of sets, but they were built from working examples in states that had programs that were successful. So this is unlike perhaps an energy service company walking in and say, well, this is the contract we'd like to use. These are sets that are tried, true, proven, and they're from the owner's perspective. And Dean, I know when we talked before, you recognize that there's a difference in building a contract from an owner's perspective than building a contract from the risk perspective of the ESCO.
That's correct. And that's the thing I leaned heavily on those model documents for that precise reason when I was putting the RFP together, and frankly, when we were putting the contract together as well. And so a lot of those key clauses that, as you mentioned, kind of are there from an owner's perspective to protect the owner's interests, were inserted directly into the RFP and are also included in the various contracts that have come out of that RFP.
And I love that you pointed us back to the request for proposals or quotations, depending upon how whose language you use. But it's fair for people to have a full understanding of what both parties need to have occur, and it should be well stated in that RFP, not just a surprise in some construction contract or performance contract down the road, right?
That's right.
Hence, I personally have had the opportunity to work with a few state attorney generals who look at the ESPC instruments and they talk about them being, multi-part and complex, and why does it have to be so hard? Well, the truth is it's encompassing all that performance as well as construction, as well as an appropriate procurement methodology so that it all dovetails together. Very, very important. Glad you mentioned that. But, I kind of want to stop now before we reach some other questions here. Tell us a little bit about the project that you're in the middle of now, because it's a far-reaching campus endeavor. And I think our audience would be very, very interested in where you're at with that.
It is. So we issued an RFP in, I believe it was November of 2021. And it was a pretty broad scoped RFP that really didn't limit at all what the ESCO would look at for the campus. So it wasn't just a lighting RFP or a renewable energy RFP or anything like that. It was a full scope. Hey, let's treat the campus as a blank slate and seek a partnership with an ESCO that could come in and fully evaluate the campus and let us know where the opportunities lie. And so We issued that RFP in 21, and we went through a pretty rigorous selection process to determine who our partner was going to be. And we selected Train as our partner in early 22. This was, of course, coming out of COVID. And so, right off the bat, Train's model is a little bit different than your standard ESCO, I would say. So instead of immediately launching into the IGA phase, the investment grade audit phase of the ESPC, Train likes to do an ASHRAE level 2 audit with their own staff at their own risk and their own cost before they spend the money with a third party to do a level 3 IGA investment grade audit of campus. So they mobilized pretty immediately and started looking at some of the opportunities on campus. Well, about that time, the university had some HERF funding from COVID. So that's the Higher Education Emergency Relief Funding Act. And we had some money that we wanted to use to do controls upgrades in several of our buildings. The problem was that funding expired in a year. So we had until June 2023 to spend that money, or it would expire and we would lose it. We initially started looking at spending that money through a traditional design, bid, build approach for these projects. We had 3 buildings in mind where we wanted to upgrade the controls in those buildings from pneumatic to DDC controls. Well, doing the timeline on the design bid build process, we would run out of time, which means we would run out of money before the construction was done. So we had an opportunity at that point to engage our ESCO partner and ask them, is there a way to speed this up by going through the ESPC? And of course, the answer was absolutely. And so they kind of redirected the efforts of their staff that was already on campus to looking at those particular buildings. And we formed a partnership with the design professionals that had already been selected for those 2 buildings. And they put a project together. It was more or less a design build project rather than design bid build. We executed it through the ESPC and was able to get those projects completely finished, constructed and turned over before the funding expired. So that was kind of a good test case for us and a proof of concept. And those projects came with guaranteed energy savings and all of the benefits of the ESPC, except they weren't primarily driven by energy savings. It was more of a capital cost avoidance financial model there that drove those projects. But we worked it all out within the framework of the legislation that authorized the ESPC and the RFP. So that was phase 1. When we were well underway on phase 1, and we saw that it was going to meet our targets and our goals, we decided to initiate a phase 2 contract as well. And lighting generally is low-hanging fruit for an ESPC because there's quite a bit of savings that are associated with lighting upgrades. And so we worked with our ESCO partner to bring in a lighting specialist who evaluated 94 buildings on campus, 48,000 fixtures, in all of the education and general space of the campus. And we ended up putting together a $10 million lighting upgrade project and executing that as phase 2. That is 98% complete now. And that was a traditional energy savings driven project executed under our ESPC program. We've got a third phase, which was yet again a different type of project, kind of a non-traditional ESPC project, but that was particularly just for energy savings equipment. So the university is planning to build 3 new dormitories on campus. We're growing in enrollment and need the space, but we don't have enough capacity in our chilled water loop to serve those 3 dormitories. So at the same time, they put out an RFP for a new mechanical plant. That was, a design professional was selected for that, and a contractor was selected for that under the normal design, bid, build approach for the overall project. Where the ESPC came into play was for the chillers and the equipment that goes inside that mechanical plant. We were able to leverage our contract with Train and the ESPC program to purchase the chillers that go inside that building on a standalone, just an equipment purchase contract with Train. So that included 3, I'm going to lose track of my numbers. I think it's 2 1,500-ton traditional chillers and then 2 250-ton heat recovery chillers. And we leveraged the ESPC to purchase those rather than, because that was the equipment we wanted, rather than taking the risk under a design bid build approach of getting equipment that we may not have as good of a history with on campus. There are certain manufacturers who have equipment on campus today that we're having a lot of issues with, either in terms of the operation of the equipment or the support for the equipment. And on a project like a central mechanical plant, we didn't want to take that risk. And so this vehicle under the ESPC allowed us to purchase and procure exactly the equipment that we wanted under GSA pricing, which was frankly lower than we could probably get under a bid anyway, and get us exactly what we wanted rather than taking that risk on a design bid project. So that is in the process. The mechanical plant is being built currently. The chillers have been manufactured. They're sitting on trailers ready to ship to us. And so that's been successful, again, a kind of a non-traditional use of an ESPC. And then phase 4, we're looking at right now. We are, in fact, conducting a campus-wide formal ASHRAE Level 3 investment grade audit for the campus. And we've identified, as a result of their initial Level 2 audit, some projects that we think are going to be very high priority for us and generate quite a bit of savings under, again, a traditional ESPC model.
So, Dean, it's a great legacy of really applying what you know to a variety of things. And there are a whole bunch of traditional objections that you've addressed sort of in a seamless way of telling that story. So just to highlight a couple of them, you mean you have control on what's going to be done in a project with a performance contract? I'm shocked.
Isn't that great? So one of the things we learned under our first phase, so that HERF-funded controls upgrade project on 3 buildings, we were able to let our ESCO partner know that, hey, we wanted automated logic controls in these buildings. We wanted to gradually move the campus from our current control system to automated logic. And our ESCO partner didn't bat an eye. They manufacture controls themselves, but they were not pushing those controls on us. They were full partners in helping us get automated logic controls in those buildings. And then again, in the phase 3 equipment purchase project, we wanted Train equipment in that case, and of course they were the manufacturer there, but we were able to specify exactly what we wanted and get exactly what we wanted.
Sure. And another myth here that we can debunk, you can actually have a capital project and a performance contract dovetailed together to accomplish what the university needs to accomplish, right?
That's right. Now, we ran into some issues, I don't want to say legislatively, but with our board, they were reluctant to let us use appropriated dollars on the equipment purchase because they considered that a sole source, despite the language in the legislation that allows us to use the ESPC. This was more of a board level decision. But that project was being funded through a number of different funding sources anyway, so that didn't ever become an issue. We were able to just move some money around and use it, purchase the equipment using university funds rather than appropriated funds, and it wasn't an issue.
So our time just runs away from us so quickly here. Just a couple of other quick questions. So who provided the upfront funds to do this work? Where'd that come from?
So good question. So phase one, the funding obviously came from the federal government. That was the HER funded projects. Phase two, we toyed with the idea of getting external financing, and that was the lighting upgrade project for the entire campus. It was a $10 million construction cost project. So we had toyed with the idea of getting third-party financing and then using the energy savings to pay that off over the term of the long-term term of the project. In the end, we elected to use internal funding to fund that project. So we paid for that upfront. For the phase three equipment purchase, the project funding that was already set aside for the main construction project paid for the equipment that went into it. For the next phase, for any projects that come out of the investment grade audit, we will probably use a combination of third-party financing and internal funds.
So there's a whole lot of pieces there. If we could have a webinar on each of these topics, I think, but just to touch on that. So you borrowed money basically from yourself, and I'm kind of managing that process in the lighting project and paid for it. So why would you track the energy savings, Dean? Tell us why you would do that.
Well, so that's a good question. I actually had that conversation yesterday with our ESCO rep on whether we really need to track M&V through the life of the project on the lighting upgrades over the 20-year term of that contract, because we don't really have to prove the savings in order to justify paying the financing of that project, since we already paid it in-house. So the M&V may not be as important in that case for us, but it's what it did for us. Number one is it gave us an estimate of what the cost savings would be, and we applied that to our ongoing utilities consumption budget, where now we don't have to increase that budget every year by the amount we would have needed to if we hadn't done the project. And so we kind of did that internal analysis to understand how to pay for the project, in other words.
Sure.
For the phase four projects and future phases, especially when it comes to mechanical upgrades and loop optimization and some other, I guess, executed projects that are a little harder to, I guess, verify or predict what the actual energy savings is going to be, we will have ongoing measurement and verification on those projects just so that we can see it. And again, because we're probably going to have third-party financing associated with that as well.
So I'm going to try to wrap us back to the beginning a little bit, and then we'll have to close. And we want to spend a little bit of time talking about eProject Express here. So you walk into a project that doesn't have a good reputation. There's this question about, well, where are the contracts? Where's the proof that they made the savings? Now we're doing new projects and you begin to think, maybe I don't need to prove that the savings are there. Maybe not for 20 years. I would encourage you to recognize from my life experience, there may be some value in a couple of years of having board authorities recognize that those savings are accruing and therefore reducing your utility spend, as you mentioned. So if I ask this question, it may sound odd, but wrapping back to the beginning, when you walked in and sort of inherited a project that had existed, was it easy to find the contracts and the calculations and all the materials that built up that project?
No, I've inherited a project a couple of times in my career. The first one was in the Navy, at a base, and there it was a little bit easier because we had a third party energy contractor who was kind of keeping track of everything associated with the ESPC. And so when I asked questions in that case, they were able to pull up the contract documents. They were able to show the measurement and verification. Again, they weren't the ESCO, but they were a third-party consultant that we had hired to kind of manage all of that. So in that case, it was easy. After getting out of the Navy and I was at the University of Memphis, taking a look at their utility expenditures, I kept seeing this recurring charge to a particular entity. And, I started asking, well, what is this for? What are we paying this for? Oh, this was an energy savings performance contract financing cost from 5 or 10 years previously. Well, what did we get for that? What did the ESCO do? How do we know that I should still be paying this cost? And asking those questions and finding out the answers became very, very difficult. Most of the documents were paper documents that had long been archived in a warehouse. They weren't even in the office that I was in. And so trying to kind of pull that thread, they had stopped doing M&V years before I got there as well. So we didn't have any ongoing documentation. We just had this ongoing charge that we were paying that nobody could explain. And it took the better part of, I don't know, 6 months to really pull out the answers and just understand that, okay, this is a legitimate charge. We've got another 6 years to pay on it. Here's what we supposedly got, but we have no way to verify right now if it's still the same benefit to us as it was. But by that point, it's too late. We're contractually obligated to continue paying that financing fee. And the original ESCO, in that case, they were still in business as an entity, but they were pretty non-responsive to our requests for information.
Dean, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing from your perspective a number of these things that we believe the audiences always want to hear. I think it's imperative that we take a moment and sort of move to Dana giving us a presentation of a tool that's designed to specifically collect the salient information about who and where and how much, and provide a means for tracking achievement, as well as a central repository that's free and secure, that's provided for you to actually store all those documents and have access to them. So once again, Dean, thanks. I know there was a question, Dana, that I jumped over here about where, Dean, did you post the RFP for a university for a performance contract?
So we posted it on our internal contract posting board that our procurement office manages.
Yeah, it sounds very simple. I'll tell you, having lived in the shoes of an ESCO for a few years, for the individual that asked the question and for the balance of the audience, the ESCOs will find your project if you post it publicly. They're
sure
in the
will.
business to help you find those projects and put them together. And quite frankly, we've mentioned a couple names here, but there are a bunch of good ones. These are professional organizations that when you ask them to partner with you and you hold them to it, great things can happen. Dean, Dana, tell us a little bit about EPX.
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what EPX can do for you guys. EPX is designed specifically for state and local governments and educational institutions. It's a streamlined pathway into the eProject Builder platform. So it's the same database as eProject Builder. It just is an easier way for you to enter your data into EPB. It's a free resource maintained by Berkeley Lab with funding from the Department of Energy. It provides a secure, user-friendly information and tracking and reporting system. It enables program administrators and project owners to track, report project investments, including estimated, guaranteed, and achieved savings. You can track and report job impacts, GHG impacts. You can standardize the way that ESCOs provide project and M&V summary data. And again, it saves time and effort by having all of your key project information and documents in one place. What are the benefits for EPX to colleges and universities? Again, it saves time and headaches with free, secure, centralized information and file storage in perpetuity, so you can have all of your project documents in one place throughout the life of the project. It provides on-demand standard and custom reporting, so you can report on your projects and programs' achievements. It makes it easy for universities to illustrate project successes, including impacts on efficiency, economic and environmental stewardship goals. Again, retains critical document files that can hold the ESCOs accountable and help avoid disputes. Simplifies ongoing project data management, even through staff turnover, and alleviates staff workload. ESCOs are responsible for uploading data and documents for review and approval. What are the benefits of EPX to ESCOs? Again, it's streamlined. EPX project data entry is quick for ESCOs. It's just a one-page Excel data entry form, unlike eProject Builder, which is a multi-tab form. EPX is much simpler. It saves time retrieving vital documents. All of your documents are in one place and everyone can access them. It gives owners quick access to project documents when you need it without having to ask the ESCO to provide them. And ESCOs can clearly see the information they need to collect and summarize for their customers in the EPX template. Here is a screenshot of that digital filing cabinet feature. You can see that it accepts all types of documents, including Word documents, Excel files, zip files, PDFs. There's also a file checklist here that you can click on, and it will show you a list of the types of documents that you might want to save in your filing cabinet. And project owners and ESCOs have the ability to save documents into the filing cabinet. Here's a couple of quick snapshots of the types of reports that you can get from eProject Express. The first is the annual M&V summary. This is a one-year summary of your M&V savings. This one on the right is the cumulative M&V report, and this shows your year-over-year savings, included estimated cost savings, guaranteed cost savings, and verified cost savings. This is the analysis and reporting feature. You can choose from custom reports or a report library. We have recently added the ability to filter only for EPX fields. So this will show you all of the fields available in EPX that you can run reports on. You can also export those results into an Excel file. Separately from this, there's also a data export feature where you can export all of your project data into an Excel file for further analysis. And I think we're going to do one more poll before we wrap up. So let me get that started. Oops. I can pull it up here. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just give you a minute to fill this out.
So while the poll is up, I'll just paint the case. In summary, you're saying that as part of the contract relationship you have with this new energy services company partner, they can provide the salient information that you need to store, host all the instruments, calculations, the meeting minutes, all of it in a single place. And then year over year, as a university professional, you can produce a report that takes the new achieved information and delivers the same report. Could this be better? It's a great tool, folks. We just want to make sure that you recognize the true value of having this repository for all this information. As we wrap up the report, the other thing that we want you to see is on this slide, there are additional resources. And I know, 40% of us responded that we want to know more about performance contracting or to hear from Dean's experiences. And I just want to tell you, when you look at these resources and these hyperlinks that'll be provided for you, as a copy of the slides does go out to all of our attendees, recognize, as an example, there are 25 podcasts here that are about 10, 15 minutes long each that break down each of the incredibly important sections of a performance contract for you to hear from folks that have spent literally decades engaged in these projects, providing you insights about them. You can understand financing options. And frankly, in today's world, not only the financing options for third-party financing, but you need to be attuned to the fact that there are credits available for a number of things, the planning, some measures. There are funds available to support these projects that you can combine with the energy savings. Looking at how to plan and what an owner's rep is. Why in the world would I want an owner's rep? Well, if you're not as well versed in construction and this methodology called energy savings performance contracting as Dean is, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody with that legitimate experience come alongside as your partner in ensuring that what needs to happen actually happens? And finally, as a consolidated place, there's a performance contracting national resource repository of information that you can walk through and look for anything that you'd like to find. Just a wealth of information available about energy savings performance contracting, certainly available for you, as well as support and training for how to use EPX, what to think about, what to plan for, and how that concept can benefit you. So we'll be sharing the recording and slide deck. Comes up as a chat. Yes, yes, and yes. So we'll be sharing the slides as an email, right, Dana?
That's correct.
And then posting the recording usually takes a couple of weeks, but you'll be able to find that on the eProject Builder website, which you can see there at eprojectbuilder.lbl.gov. And in help where the training information is, you'll actually find a recording of our time that we spent together. So, having covered that, Dean, any final thoughts that you'd wish to share? I mean, this is your opportunity to have a group of folks that are listening to you. What would you tell them? These are the key things you'd want to know.
Well, thanks, Dale and Dana. I appreciate the opportunity to share with this webinar and appreciate your time and efforts in putting this on and putting out this information. I guess the main thing I would like to share as not so much as a lesson learned, but as a real benefit that we've found, especially in my experience here at the University of Mississippi. Having the right ESCO partner as part of your program is absolutely critical. So if you're thinking about an ESPC at your own institution, please take the time to develop an RFP or an RFQ, whichever you need to, that will truly vet the partners or the ESCOs that are applying to be a partner for you. ESPCs are not transactional contracts. They are long-term relationships. And so you want to have somebody on your team and as a partner that supports and believes in that long-term relationship.
Well said, Dean. And I can tell you in my history of trying to provide support tools, one of the things that's critically important is you put out the RFP, folks answer it. But then you want to sit down with them in some interview environment and ask them real questions. Who's going to be my engineer of record? Who will be in my facilities? What will happen if there's a shortfall in the energy savings? Tell me if that's ever happened to you. Who should I call to find out that you've done a good job supporting them or a poor job of supporting them? Are you willing to be my partner using eProject Express to help me collect and maintain this salient information? Are you committed to the long-term proposition of providing measurement and verification? Question over question over question. It's how you understand the relationship will go forward. I used to tell people no one would write a performance specification and bid for their spouse. You just wouldn't do it. You need to get to know those people because you're planning on spending a couple of decades with them. And it's a great way to go about securing a relationship that's long lasting and inviting them in as a partner.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that.
So the one other question that I saw here that was interesting to me, and we didn't talk a lot about it, but can you utilize renewables in these projects? Well, of course you can. I mean, it's a little bit different how you go about it because they may not be saving energy, but they're avoiding a cost that you would have sustained anyway. So once again, it's the full value of having an understanding about how it can be done, the contractual mechanisms, and what the reconciliation, measurement, and verification is going to look like. I mean, if I'm a university, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do in a project, every day I'd ask my question, what's the presentation that I'm going to be making to the board to instill the confidence that the work that we did produced the result that was intended? Stephen Covey, great author, always had this tagline, begin with the end in mind. And I'd offer for you that that's a great philosophy about these projects. Always begin with the end in mind and then measure the success with EPX. Thank you for joining us today. Dean, once again, thanks for carving out time out of your day to share your life experiences with all of us. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dean. I just want to remind everyone that you can always reach out to EPB support if you have any questions, and we will post the slides and the recording as soon as it's available. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.